Remember Misty? She's been around the Pokemon world for a long time, but you probably know her as that annoying character from the OG anime series. But I think that Misty gets a little too much hate. Like, yeah, she's stubborn and kinda rude, and according to CBR, she's done some horrible things to Psyduck, but I don't think she's as weak or mean or useless as everyone says. So to prove the haters wrong, today we're gonna try to beat Pokemon Violet playing as Misty. That means we're only gonna be allowed to use Pokemon that Misty has used throughout the anime, manga, games, or any other random bit of niche Pokemon material. And as if using a team put together by a 10-year-old side character wasn't hard enough, we're also going to be playing with a bunch of super challenging rules on top. But is it possible? Can Misty achieve her dreams of becoming a Pokemon master just like Ash? Well, let's find out. We start off the game by crawling out of bed and walking downstairs to chat with our lovely mother, who tells us to leave the house and get a job. I'm no freeloader, so I head outside to greet my school principal, who shows us our starters. Naturally, I'm playing as Misty, so I'm contractually obligated to choose the water type, so come on down, Quaxley. I name him Elvis because Misty is famously a huge fan of Elvis Scoria, the world-renowned Croatian football player. After choosing my starter, I look at Nimona frothing at the mouth to battle a new opponent, so I accept her first challenge. After beating up our rival, I head to the meadows to pick on a few wild boars, and I end up falling off a cliff and rescuing a space dragon. Then after narrowly surviving a couple near-death experiences in a cave, we continue on our way to school, where we meet our first real team member, Psyduck. Since Misty first caught Psyduck in episode 27 of the anime, this was a pretty fitting start. I name our newest friend Pikachu just to make writing this script as confusing as possible. Finally, with our Psyduck in hand, we head over to school, but before we get there, Nimona demands another fight, and I immediately lose to her terastallized electric type Palmy. That kinda sucks, but just like Misty, I'm also a baller, so I don't let that loss get to me. Now it's finally time for us to go to school, but first we need to help this girl Penny, who's being bullied for her lunch money. We rush right in to be Penny's knight in shining armor and defend her honor against these rapscallions. We successfully defeat her bullies and promptly tell these loiterers to scram. Oh no, I'm almost late for class! Despite my many detours, we barely make it to school on time and avoid the tardy bell, but school is extremely boring for a person with ADHD like myself and Misty, and I get distracted by a gigantic treasure hunt. But in order to find this secret treasure, I'm gonna need to get stronger. So I head off to find Misty's next Pokemon, Azurill, who she used in Ruby and Sapphire. Now, Azurill is an interesting little guy. He has the ability Huge Power, which doubles his attack stat, making it absolutely bonkers. What a powerful blue blob, look at him go! For extra clarity, our Azurill of course gets the nickname Pika-Blue. Then we head towards the first gym fight with Katie. Misty isn't a big fan of bug types, and so naturally neither am I. So definitely looking forward to being finished with this one. I reluctantly make my way over to Cortando with my Pikachu and Pika-Blue, exploring this incredible town of 2 gas stations and a couple yellow houses. Man, they really went all in on the amenities here, huh? Anyway, at this point, it's time for Misty to face Katie the Bug Lady, so after we push a giant olive around for some reason, we're allowed to challenge the gym leader. She sends out Nimble, and I send out Pika-Blue for the first time. Nimble does a bit of damage with a double kick, but I just jump in the air to assert dominance. After dodging the next slew of attacks, I beat the Grasshopper in one shot with a super effective bounce. Her next Pokemon, Tarantula's Bug Bite, isn't very strong either, so just like before, I use Bounce again. And after a couple quick slams from the sky, we destroy Tarantula, and Katie the strange gross bug lady is on her last team member. But alas, I was no match for this teddy bear's swipes, and we end up losing Pika-Blue. I try to make the best of this battle, but without Pika-Blue, we don't stand much of a chance, so we end up taking an L. You see, Nimble isn't much of a threat, and neither is Tarantula, but Teddiursa can be a real problem with the Terra-boosted Fury Cutter that just keeps getting stronger and stronger the more times it gets used. With no other options, I decide to level up both my Psyduck and Azurill just a tiny little bit. Eventually, Psyduck gets access to Water Pulse, and at level 14, Azurill actually gets access to 2 very powerful moves, Charm and Slam. By teaching it these moves and then buffing Azurill's attack EV just a little bit through some training, we're in a really good position to take on this gym, and in particular that teddy bear from HE Double Hockey Sticks. So I head back into the gym and challenge Katie to a battle. She leads with her Nimble and I lead with Pika-Blue. I also did a little EV training to boost our speed and defense before this, so hopefully I'd get a better chance to outspeed some of her attacks, which yeah. we don't get. But our defense training means that double kick does less damage than before, which is still quite helpful. Anyway, Pikablu soars up to the sky and takes out this grasshopper in a single hit. Now it's time for Tarantula. Thankfully, my speed training has made me faster than this thing, so this one's not too big of a deal. Bounce barely doesn't kill, but the benefit of outspeeding this time is I only take one bug bite, meaning I have over half of our Azrael's health left as I head in against the final Pokemon. These are far better circumstances for Teddiursa than we've seen before, so I was a little bit more confident here. Teddiursa terastallizes and hits me with Fury Swipes, which does insane damage, but it only hits twice, meaning I'm able to get off a charm, lowering its attack by 2 stages. With its attack lowered, Fury Cutter isn't enough to take us out, and so we're able to get off another charm, putting this bear at -4 attack, which lets us survive another turn and go for a bounce. We take out about half of Teddiursa's HP before Fury Swipes take us out. From here, I bring in Psyduck, who hits Teddiursa with a Water Pulse, putting him into the red and confusing him. Unfortunately, we don't get lucky with the confusion, but Fury Cutter does next to no damage at this point, so one more Water Pulse takes out this teddy bear. Huge dubs. After the gym, we go back to the great outdoors to find the next member of the Misty squad, Weasel. And I've been absolutely addicted to God of War recently, so I name him Boy. The Pokemon superfans out there might know that Misty actually never had a Weasel in the anime. However, she did have a Floatzel in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and in order to get a Floatzel, she had to have a Weasel at some point, right? Alright, it's my video, I don't care what you think. Anyway, after catching Weasel, it's time to take on the Stony Cliff Titan Cloth. I've never had any issues with Larry the Lobster before, so I figured this battle would be pretty easy, but just to be sure, I level up my Weasel to level 15 and teach him Water Gun. I also take this time to do some training for my Weasel by auto-battling a lot of the Knackley in the surrounding area to get some defense EVs. And with that done, it's time to take on Dr. Zoidberg. I throw out Weasel first against Cloth and use Water Gun, doing about 1/3 of its HP as it uses Rock Smash. One more Water Gun later and I leave Cloth on a sliver of HP, which sucked because next turn Weasel gets KO'd. Psyduck comes out next as Cloth goes for a block, preventing our escape, but that was a stupid move for it to make because I was the one who challenged him in the first place. Like, it seems like he would be the one who would want to escape, right? Am I crazy here? Anyway, I never back down from a challenge, so I hit Cloth with Water Pulse, ending the first phase of the fight. After Cloth scarfs down some Herba Mystica and goes sicko mode, we continue our brawl at the bottom of the ledge, and to my utmost surprise, it begins to rain. This was literally game-changing because it means that all of my water-type attacks were boosted. So Cloth hits Psyduck with a Rock Tomb, lowering his speed as Arven's Shelter goes for a Tail Whip. Then I smack it with a critical Water Pulse before Psyduck goes down on the next turn. At this point, all that's left is my Azrael, but thankfully Cloth hits it for literally no damage with the Rock Smash. From here, we team up with Arven's Shelter and use a double Bubble Beam, which turns Cloth into a Krabby Patty. Stony Cliff Titan defeated. After feeding my Harley Davidson some weird plants growing in a cave, I set my sights on Artisan to challenge the next gym leader, Brassius. At first, I just wanted to speedrun to take on Brassius as soon as possible, but then I started thinking. My bounce strategy worked pretty well against Katie, but Brassius has Sudowoodo, whose defense is really high. And unlike Katie, Brassius is a grass trainer, which is going to be a big problem for our little wet boys. Yeah, this fight was gonna be pretty hard. But thankfully, we had a solution to our problem here. A Pokemon that Misty has canonically used that would be able to hit Brassius for super effective damage and completely change the tides for this fight. Shelter. But wait, Quinn, that's cheating. Misty never had a Shelter. I'm gonna unsubscribe and dropkick my PC now because you're such a liar. And to you, shameful critic, I say you're wrong because canonically in both the TCG and manga, Misty is proven to have a Shelter. So I'm right, you're wrong. Don't destroy your gaming computer. Please, it's very expensive. Ahem. Now moving on, unfortunately Shelter was gonna be pretty tricky to catch. At this point we can't surf the open seas where they normally spawn with Miraidon, so that's a bust. However, there is one part of the map where you can reach Shelters without surfing, and that part of the map is right down here below the swampy area. After a bit of accidental unfortunate swimming, I managed to catch a Shelter here and give him the nickname Steven. With Steven the Shelter in hand, I head back to Artisan to take on Brassius. Bro, How did you even get up there? After Brassius breaks his legs jumping from a 40-foot tall windmill, the gym battle between us commences. Turn 1, I lead with Azurill as Brassius sends out Petlil. This little leafy boy goes for a Mega Drain as Pika responds with a bounce. The next turn, our opponent misses Sleep Powder because I'm literally in the stratosphere, and pretty soon Pika attack lands. So far, so good. Petlil goes for a Sleep Powder again, and this time it connects. Lucky for me though, I have a Chesto Berry equivalent to 25 espressos that we gave our little boy before the battle, and pretty soon Slam is enough to take out the flower. Then, next up is Smoliv. I spam bounce like normal, and it's super effective against Mr. Broken Legs, but the Olive Man is just too strong and obliterates my Pika, so I'm forced to swap to Steven. I send in Shelder and take out a Smoliv pretty quickly with the super effective Ice Shard, and then finally out comes Sudowoodo, who terastallizes into Truly Woodo. I use Ice Shard, which barely does any damage against this defensive monster, and it seems that a good defense is also the best offense, apparently, because Sudowoodo uses Trailblaze and does huge damage to Shelder. I go for another Ice Shard, but quiver in fear as I watch my attack hit him like a wet noodle, as Sudowoodo sets up another Trailblaze, putting it at +2 speed. And guess what? It's time to panic! I send out Psyduck in the hopes that a Disable will save me, but all hope is lost because at this point Sudowoodo is a speed demon and it manages to obliterate us with yet another Trailblaze. My last hope is to use but he can't do anything to Sudowoodo's insane defense, so unfortunately we gotta take the L with this one. But if Misty is known for being anything, it's that she's extremely stubborn. So I keep going at this fight with everything I got. But this time, I decide to change up my strategy a bit. After a bit of grinding, I get to Truly Voodoo again. This time, we decide to go for a Charm, but before we can get it off, we get hit by a Trailblaze that we barely survive on 1 HP like a Chad. From here, we switch into Buizel and go for Growl to lower its attack even more. Trailblaze does about half of my HP, but another Growl ensures that I can survive the next turn. At this point, I go for my final Growl, but I'm outsped by Sudowoodo, meaning Trailblaze takes me down like an absolute casual. From here, I send in Pikachu to disable Trailblaze as it does just under half my HP. I go for a Confusion as Rock Throw barely does any damage, but on the next turn, Sudowoodo gets an unfortunate crit, knocking out Psyduck. At this point, I send in Shelder and set up a Whirlpool to get some chip damage as Rock Throw hits us for basically nothing. Really, the only thing I can do this point is just spam Whirlpool and hope we can chip this thing down before we get crit again. But lucky for me, the combination of Ice Shard and Whirlpool was enough to take out Truly Voodoo, winning us one of the hardest battles in this entire playthrough. With our second gym leader taken down, I set my sights on the next Titan, Bombardier. From here, I heal up my Pokemon and head up to the West Province Area 1. And to be fair, I was really confident in this upcoming fight. Normally, I'm scared to fight the giant pelican because he has the strange habit of constantly one-shotting me and my Pokemon, but this time, since I had Steven, the type advantage was on my side. After traveling the open highways with my Harley Davidson, we finally approached the mountain where Big Bird was waiting for us. Okay, Phase 1. I lead with Shelder and hit Whirlpool as Bombardier uses Pluck. Whirlpool does its thing and does the chip damage over time as I use Ice Shard. Pretty soon after repeating this a bunch, Phase 1 goes down, but only after Bombardier takes out both Steven and Pikachu, meaning we had to fight Phase 2 with only 2 Mons. But luckily we have Arven the Undefeatable to carry the fight on his back. And Pika is immediately knocked out, so you got this, Arven. Nacli hits Bombardier with a Smackdown, which does a lot of damage, but the onslaught of attacks from Bombardier is causing significant harm to this salty little boy. Nacli continues using Smackdown, but eventually it faints to a wing attack and we lose the battle here, so if you ask me, it's all Arven's fault. Let's try that again. I lead with Azurill and start using Charm to lower Bombardier's attack stat since all it has are physical attacks. After charming the pants off this big bird, Pluck does minuscule damage to me as our Slam hits back with a huge amount of power. I decide to use Slam again, but of course I miss the second one as Nacli keeps polishing his shoes in classic fashion. Arven, I thought you were supposed to carry, dude. At this point I just switch from Azurill because he's not doing enough damage, so it's time to go back to Shelder. I use a super effective Ice Shard to put Bombardier into the red, and then Nacli finishes the fight. Fantastic job, Arven. I never doubted you for a second. With the Sesame Street wannabe defeated, my Azurill starts to evolve into a Marill, officially welcoming him into the Water-type club. With my newest power-up acquired, I set my sights on my favorite DJ extraordinaire, Hakumo. So I make my trek over to the Dark Team starbase, but not before making a quick stop off in Mesagoza. While in town, I get some items for my Mons to hold. I give Marill a muscle band to increase its attack stat, and I also give Psyduck a Mystic Water to boost the power of Water-type attacks. With my power level rapidly skyrocketing, I was now prepared to fight the musician in training. I get past the guards with the help of my newly acquired move Aqua Tail, then take care of the 30 other Mons in the Dark Team starbase until the big man himself comes out to see what's up. I start with Marill as Hakumo sends out Pawniard. We go for Aqua Tails as it uses Metal Claw. Thankfully, water resists steel, so Metal Claw only hits us for neutral damage. But I can't take another hit, so I switch into Shellder, whose defensive prowess means Metal Claw barely tickles us. Shellder's doing great chip damage against Pawniard, and after one more Ice Shard and a Whirlpool, we get to Hakumo's ace, Revavroom. Revavroom blasts me with a metal sound, and Hakumo's awful taste in music lowers my special defense. Then, after a quick snarl, Steven is knocked out. I swap into Marill and tank a Swift before hitting back with a very weak Aqua Tail. Revavroom blasts a Nickelback song with metal sound, which Marill dodges, but one more Swift puts our mouse into the red. I try my best, but unfortunately Revavroom is just too fast, and Marill is KO'd on the next turn. I was still determined to win this fight, so I put my big boy pants on and toughed it out. After putting my nose to the grindstone, defeating what felt like billions of Mudbray, my fearsome Peekaboo finally evolves into a Azumarill. Hakumo stood no chance at all now. My victory was absolutely assured. This time, Azumarill was gonna carry. Pawniard comes out and I start with Shellder. I go for Whirlpool, which does actually decent damage as well as trapping the Pawniard. Next turn I go for Supersonic. I was kinda hoping that it would hit itself in confusion and get damaged by Whirlpool, but that was kind of a stretch because it doesn't happen at all. Pawniard snaps out of confusion the next turn as I go for another Whirlpool, putting it into the red. The following turn, Aerial Ace leaves me on 3 HP, but it's all good because Steven takes out the little metal boy. With Pawniard out of the way, it's once again time to face Hakumo's Toyota Camry. I let Steven take the Intimidate, and then he goes down to a Snarl, but then I swap to my ace in the hole, and oh boy, was that the right call. I use Play Rough, which immediately cuts Hakumo's Nissan Altima in half. He goes for a metal sound, but unfortunately for him, I'm a master of the ancient art of using the same move over and over again, and even though our next attack misses, after a couple of turns, Hakumo is finally defeated. I take it back. Your music wasn't really that bad. Anyway, I wasn't in a position to celebrate because our next opponent was going to be our hardest challenge yet, Iono. You see, Iono is an electric-type trainer, which immediately puts me at a disadvantage because I'm weak to her entire roster. And if that wasn't bad enough, her Miss Magus is famous for being one of the hardest battles in the entire game. Nonetheless, I have a plan. Just like before, there's a perfect Pokemon for this kind of situation. One that Misty has used before that would make Iono's Pokemon completely useless. That's right, it's Whoopin' time. I mean, technically, Misty has only used a Quagsire, but it's basically the same thing. Anyway, Wooper is both a water and ground type, which completely changes the tides for this fight, no pun intended. So I quickly head to Kitakami in the Johto region and find myself our glorious new friend. I decide to name our Wooper Loco because of how goofy Quagsire looks. I didn't want to just name him Goofy because, you know, copyright and all. So after evolving Loco into a Quagsire, it was time to take on Iono. But psych, we're actually jump scared by Nemona, who's just been stalking me the whole time. Naturally, she demands a battle, so I oblige. She begins with Rockruff while I start off with Shellder. Rockruff immediately goes for a double team as I use Whirlpool, putting in some good damage. We go back and forth a bit, some of my attacks miss, but I'm not too concerned. After a while, I get a lucky Whirlpool and knock out Nemona's Fido. Next up is Palmy, who's a little tougher than Rockruff since it's an electric type. It goes for a dig and I go for a Mud Shot, but I'm a noob, so I miss. But the ancient art of button mashing strikes again, and pretty soon Palmy is crushed by the power of mud. Next up is Nemona's ace Crocolore, so I use my same strategy of flinging mud, but then I remembered that Nemona is an actual idiot for choosing a fire type against a water type when we first got started, so I just spam water attacks with Weasel and Psyduck, and we take home the Dubski. After our anime rival was defeated, defeated, it was Iono time, so we quickly finish her game show challenges and brace ourselves as we enter what could be the most challenging battle of this entire playthrough. She leads with Wattrel and I send out a Azumarill. I go for an Aqua Tail as Wattrel hits me with a Spark, but I'm a moron and of course miss my Aqua Tail. To add to our problems, we end up getting paralyzed so we can't do anything on the next turn. But luckily I get a sweet crit on the following turn, then Iono sends out Bellibolt. I switch to Quagsire instantly because he just says no to everything Bellibolt stands for, and pretty soon he can't touch me at all. And with our ground type immunity to electric attacks, this thing literally cannot do anything to us. With our foe completely neutralized, I spam Mudshot to get through Iono's third Pokemon and her fourth Pokemon, Luxio. But now is the tricky part, because we've arrived at Iono's ace, Mismagius. At this point, my plan was simple. First, I try to yawn on the Mismagius, but it hits me with the Confuse Ray, which makes me hit myself in confusion instead. Bruh. I try again, but the confusion is completely owning me, and before long, Loco gets KO'd. Panicking, I try to swap to Psyduck to get a nice Aqua Tail in, but Mismagius paralyzes it as well and completely rolls us with a Charge Beam. Needless to say, this was gonna be tough. I make a few more attempts on Iono, sometimes getting to her ace, but between the confusion and her laser Death Beam of Destruction 9000, I was getting completely overpowered. But after many tries, I finally got a good run going. Mismagius goes for Confuse Ray and I go for Yawn, and once again I hit myself in confusion. Not sick. Mismagius uses Hex the next turn, and luckily Quagsire snaps out of his confusion and lets me finally get a yawn onto Mismagius. From here I use Rain Dance to buff the frick out of Azumarill's Aqua Tail, and now that Mismagius is asleep, I take my chance and swap to Peekaboo, who comes in and lands a boosted Aqua Tail, pulling out one of the most clutch one-hit KOs I've ever seen. And with that, Iono was finally defeated. After dispatching this wannabe internet celebrity, next up is the Fire Team Starbase, and with my armada of water-type mons, this was gonna be the easiest raid of my life. I make it to the Starbase, and of course I have no problem with the 30 Pokemon inside, and in absolutely no time at all, we summon Mela, our next boss. And as you can imagine, given my massive type advantage, this was really not challenging at all. Mela starts with Torkoal, setting up the sun, and I lead with Quagsire. And as soon as the fight begins, I do an ancient Aztec rain dance and summon Hurricane Katrina, overriding the sun. And you all can call me the lawnmower because I'm mowing through these mons like it's nothing. Or should I say, the Mon Mower. Anyway, from here she sends out her Honda Civic, but that's not an issue either, and we easily smack this thing to bits, getting through the Fire Team Starbase in what felt like 5 seconds. But we don't have any time to rest because I'm all about that Sigma grind set, baby, so I dash over to the lurking Steel Titan, Earthworm. We make our way toward the mine area on the map, then chase the Alaskan Bullworm around before the battle starts. I lead with Quagsire and go for a yawn to put the Earthworm to sleep, and the next turn I go for a Mudshot. But I completely forgot that Earthworm's ability makes it immune to ground type attacks. So I switch to a Azumarill and get some damage in before it wakes up and chooses Violence, slapping me in the face with an Iron Tail on its next turn. I try to swap to our boy Pikachu, but he gets owned too, so I go back to Quagsire and try to summon another Hurricane. But that was also useless because Big Q gets KO'd as well. The only thing I can do is fight back with Weasel, who eventually gets the kill on Phase 1 of the Eater of Worlds. Just to be safe, I go back and heal my Pokemon up before continuing to the second phase of this fight. I also grab a Damp Rock for Quagsire, which boosts the time that Rain is active, which should help out a decent bit. With my new strategy ready, I head back to face the powered up lurking Steel Titan. The battle begins and I lead with Quagsire and go for a yawn followed by a Rain Dance. With Earthworm asleep, I just need to use Water Gun as Arven and his Toadstool go for Hex to do big damage. And after just a couple of turns, the lurking Steel Titan was no more. With more than half of the Titans out of the way, I take a breather here and do some EV training. I wanted to get a little bit more prepared for the upcoming Kofu fight, since we were literally going to have to fight water with water, so I start making my way past the Asado Desert, picking up any TMs I can find. Specifically, I wanted the Earthquake TM, and in order to get that, we had to take on all the trainers in the Asado Desert. As we battle our way through the trainers, Weasel evolves into its final form. Now with my powered up Floatzel in Earthquake TM, it was time to take on the big man Kofu. After watching him sprint across town, we find him at an auction where we try to give him back his wallet, but his little fanboy stops us in our track. He demands a battle, so naturally I have to assert my dominance, destroying his Floatzel with mine. After our win against Ludwig Ogren, we win a bidding war for some kelp, and with the gym test passed, we go back to Kaskarafa so we can challenge Kofu. Just to be sure I was ready, I max out my entire team at level 30 and get a few items for the gym battle. Shelter gets a Mystic Water, Floatzel learns Double Team and Bulk Up, and Quagsire learns Aqua Tail. Then, we get ready to earn our next gym badge. I send out Floatzel against Kofu's Veluza, and let me tell ya, it is impossible to overstate how much Bulk Up carried this fight. It was unreal. I literally bulk up, then get through everything Kofu has in 5 seconds. Veluza, boom, one shot. Wugtrio, boom, one shot. Crabominable, Kofu's strongest Pokemon, boom, one shot. Okay, I didn't one-shot this one. But still, this was a pretty clean sweep. Misty does not mess around fighting other water trainers. With Kofu crying to his mom, I head over to defeat my next victim, Atticus. Unfortunately for us, this wouldn't be a clean sweep like before because the poison matchup could be a little tricky with my team, but like I said, I'm a baller, so I wasn't worried. I break into the Team Star Gamer house where I meet the big man himself, and before long, Atticus demands to fight. He leads with Skuntank as I lead with Quagsire. I go for Earthquake as Skuntank hits me with a Toxic. Toxic is really bad news since it does a ton of damage over time on our very best Pokemon for this fight, but it's not too big of a deal because we clear him out on the next turn. Next is Revavroom, but I don't mean the decked out Ferrari that Atticus is standing on, no, just the tiny embarrassing little baby version. As you can guess, this thing is just as lame as it looks and it dies in one shot. Out next is Muck, and this was gonna be tricky because he comes in and smacks us with a Sludge Wave. He completely obliterates us and I'm forced to send out Boy, hoping to get some big damage after bulking up. But that plan failed too because I ended up getting buried by poison. I send out a Azumarill next, who gets put into the yellow with a Sludge Wave, but he comes in clutch as he takes down Muck with an Aqua Tail. The playing field was somewhat even now, but I was still really low on health, and so I watched in horror as Atticus summoned his most powerful Pokemon, Ferrari number 2, Electric Boogaloo. I knew I was staring overwhelming power in the face, but I couldn't do anything as Peekaboo just kind of faints. Now it was down to my last 2 Pokemon, Pikachu and Steven. My brave boy Steven takes out half of the Ferrari's hit points, but he wasn't quite strong enough to finish the job. And with that, I was on my last Pokemon.
Let's go, Pikachu!
Okay, yeah, whatever, that's fine. Things were not going according to my ingenious plans. In our next attempt, just to be safe, I gave Azumarill a Pecha Berry to cure poison, and I evolved my Pikachu into Golduck, and with all my Pokemon at the level cap, I head back in to take on Atticus once again. I get through his main Pokemon at about the same pace as last time, then I'm ready to beat down his Lamborghini. And even though Floatzel gets knocked out, Quagsire was able to take the dub against the Poison Man, besting the 3rd member of Team Star. With the poisonous oddball defeated, our next great opponent was Larry, possibly the most relatable person in the entire game. I'm not a monster, so I grab some ingredients to make him lunch before challenging him to a fight. I have manners. Okay, I lead with my Floatzel, and Larry sends out his Kamala first. Easy peasy. Kamala always goes for a yawn turn 1, so I use Bulk Up. I fall asleep and take some damage from his slams, but after I wake up, I knock him out with a quick crunch. From here, his Dunsparce tries to paralyze me with a super intimidating glare, but I get through it with a couple powered up crunches like a boss. Finally, Larry sends in his ace, Staraptor. Unfortunately, I get paralyzed by the utter glory of a terrestrialized Gen 4 Paldean Pokemon, and our boy faints. I switch to Azumarill and he dies, but finally we send in Shelter, who tanks Staraptor's facade like a god among men. I take the opportunity to swap back to Quagsire, and after a few lucky crits, we beat Larry. But we don't get too much time to celebrate because it turns out Nimona wasn't far behind. And, of course, she demands another battle. Of course. Nimona leads with Lycanroc, and I start with Floatzel. A couple bulk ups later, and I'm decked out to win this. I Aqua Jet the Lycanroc and double hit the Palmo, and then Goomy gets crunched. Last is Skeledirge, and I was sweating bullets because I almost died to his Terra boosted Torch Song, Lucky for me though, Aquajet takes down the Fire Lizard boy. And now I have a little bit of time to level up my team members, so I scout the local area and make my way up the icy mountain to Monte de Vera to find Rhyme. I say a quick hello to Moist Critical, get my team ready, and then begin the fight against our next gym leader. This battle is really not that hard considering the audience buffs you throughout the fight, but I almost felt like that didn't matter with how strong I was. Loco and Boy were just completely owning everyone, and it wasn't even close. Oh, that's your strongest Pokemon? Nope. There's not much else to say here. Honestly, it wasn't a very fair fight. At this point in the game, the big battles are back to back, so after defeating Rhyme, I fly over to the Asado Desert and take on the Quaking Earth Titan. It's here where Peekaboo does his best One Punch Man impression because Iron Treads dies in one hit. I'm worried that we might be a little bit too strong. Anyway, with the second phase of the Quaking Earth Titan on full display, we're joined by Arven the Obliterator. With the combined power of my incredibly busted Aqua Tail and Scovillain's Fire Fangs, we put an end to the Quaking Earth Titan and get one of the last Herba Mysticas. After our newest victory, we head over to Alfornada to get our palms read because next up is the Psychic Gym Leader, but oh my god, you're so annoying! I get jump scared by Nemona again, who I swear is stalking me, but whatever. I prepare myself for another battle. I lead with Floatzel, who spams Bulk Up, and then get past her Lycanroc like it's nothing. And before long, I do the same to Nemona's Pawmot, Sliggoo, and her Skeledirge. Man, forget Ash. Misty probably had a real shot at becoming the world champion with this team. I mean, geez. Before the Tulip fight, I wanted to do some leveling up, but I had a bit of a dumb moment here where I accidentally over-leveled my Floatzel, meaning I couldn't use him for this upcoming fight, which was a huge bummer. So to make up for this, I go looking for the last member of my team to replace Floatzel, and I eventually settle on a Slowpoke who Misty used in the anime. I name my newest friend Mood because honestly, Slowpoke is my spirit animal. What a mood. After evolving my Mood into a Bro, we finally go to challenge Tulip, the second to last gym leader. Slowbro is an absolute tank when it comes to special defense, but he doesn't have a lot of offense, so the plan here was for Quagsire to yawn the Farigiraf, then set up Rain Dance. With Farigiraf asleep, I switch into Slowbro and start setting up Amnesia to raise Slowbro's special defense, making all of Tulip's special attacking Pokemon essentially useless. After a couple of Surfs take down Farigiraf, out comes Gardevoir. Even though our special defense is boosted, Gardevoir is still scary because she has Energy Ball, which gives me a little bit of anxiety. She keeps on spamming Energy Ball, but after a couple of Surfs from Mood, we get through her no problem. But I can't relax yet because this Pathra just spams a retextured version of the same move, which also hits me super effectively. But luckily, Slowbro has access to Slack Off, which we use to regenerate our HP. And after a bit of back and forth, we beat his Pathra with a couple more Surfs. But now it was gamer time because Tulip sends out her ace, Florges. In preparation, I use my last PP of Slack Off, expecting a Petal Blizzard, and I call it right, literally saving the run. However, Slowbro eventually goes down to this big bouquet, but it's fine because we ended up getting some serious damage. And after swapping to Peekaboo, we take care of Tulip's last line of defense, earning our 7th gym badge. I ain't wasting no time at all, so I rush on over to take care of the final gym leader, Grusha. I grab myself a Calm Mind TM to boost Slowbro's offense, then go full speedrunner mode down the side of a mountain, and finally it was time for me to crush Grusha. Alright, turn 1. I decide to try the bulk up strategy once again, so I lead with Quagsire against Frostmoth. I go for a yawn, then go to set up Rain Dance, but the edgy Snowboarder man hits me with the Blizzard before going for a power nap. After he falls asleep, I swap to Floatzel, and I should have named him Saitama because the One Punch Man is back. After I steamroll his Big Moth, Polar Bear, and Titan, I one-shot his ace to... What? It survives, but that wasn't too big of a deal because I could just get him with another attack next turn. No! And with that, my one-shotting streak comes to a close. With knocked out, my only option was to switch to Golduck. And next turn, the final gym leader witnessed the true wrath of Misty. With all 8 gym badges in my possession, we could now catch Pokemon of any level, but that didn't really matter because my team was basically complete. But nonetheless, this was a momentous occasion. After celebrating my last victory with Nemona and Gita, I head over to tie up some loose ends with one of the last team star raids. So I head to the fairy base to take on Ortega. After getting through Ortega's butler and a couple team Star side characters, it's time for the main event as Ortega comes out on his souped up Hyundai. Okay, I'm running out of car brands. Anyway, Ortega leads with his own Azumarill and I start with Quagsire. The only move Azumarill has that hits me is Play Rough, which does pretty heavy damage as I go for Yawn, but after he falls asleep, we take him out pretty swiftly. Next up is Ortega's Darkspun, who goes down to a single Psychic like a filthy casual. The same can be said for Wigglytuff, who can't do anything to me because I'm just built different. After another Surf, Ortega summons his Dodge Durango, who runs over our simple boy, so I swap to Peekaboo, who gets hit by the Orb of Confusion. Our Azumarill tries to rizz up the pickup truck, but accidentally keeps punching itself in the face, so I swap back to Golduck, who, need I remind you, is not gold and does not look like a duck. Fortunately, our Pikachu gets the job done and pressure washes Ortega's Bugatti, and the penultimate Team Star member was down for the count. And with the fairy raid out of the way, it's time to take on the False Dragon Titan. I just wonder where it is. The only thing I see is this small little oh, good heavens! With the False Dragon Titan unearthed, I decide to use the same strategy I always use, so after putting Dondozo to sleep, I set up some Calm Minds and hit him with a crit, ending phase 1. The second phase goes down easily as well. Arven the alpha male and I do some good teamwork, and pretty soon the last Titan was dead. Wait, it has a third form? I prepare myself for the most terrifying form of this monstrosity yet, a tiny goldfish. It was a good thing that we had a Azumarill because he completely carried this one on his back. Nothing interesting really happened, we just spammed Play Rough and demolished this SpongeBob side character. And finally, that puts an end to the second storyline. And now we only have one more boss to beat. Using my extensive speedrunner aptitude, I run as fast as I can to take on Eri, the last Team Star leader. Let me tell you, Slowbro made this fight 10,000 times easier than it would have been otherwise. I lead with Quagsire and Yawn the Toxicroak before switching in Slowbro, who says no to the damage from Brick Braid. After calming down her Toxicroak, I hit it with a one-hit KO because it's 4 times weak to psychic attacks. I also obliterate her Passimian, and after healing a little bit against Lucario, I take both him and Annihilate down in one shot too. Next up, Eri tries to run me over with her white sedan, but I survive on just 2 HP. After using Slack off a bit, I'm basically back on full health. Now that I'm healing faster than Eri can damage me, I prepare for a psychic attack, and I guess Mood is shooting anti-tank bullets or something because her Ford Mustang turns into a tin can. But with all 3 storylines falling to Misty the Conqueror, we were in the endgame. My confidence was now soaring higher than ever before, but just to be sure I would demolish the final bosses, I go to evolve Shelder because I haven't used him since Brassius. Poor little guy. We evolve him with our Water Stone, then head back to school where I face our first real challenge. The school principal Clavel, revealing that he was Clive the entire time. And never would I have guessed that he would be the most humbling fight of this entire playthrough. Clavel leads with Oranguru and I lead with Quagsire. The goal here is to use the same strategy as every challenging fight, so I use Yawn on the Oranguru and set up Rain the next turn. With Oranguru asleep, I hit it with a Razor Shell from Cloyster, but get yawned in the process, and to top it all off, our Razor Shell barely scratches him. With Cloyster asleep, I switch to Floatzel, but Oranguru cuts our physical attack in half with a Reflect. I try to boost my attack, but he puts Floatzel asleep too. With a third of my team asleep, I swap to our newly evolved Slowbro, who finally manages to take out Clavel's monkey. Out next is Abomasnow. I stay in with Slowbro and go for a Psychic as Abomasnow sets up an Aurora Veil, and Frosty the Cringelord takes down Slowbro with a Wood Hammer. I try to get some damage in with a Azumarill, but he dies pretty fast too. After Quagsire dies on the next turn, I send in Cloyster, who finally takes down Abomasnow, and pretty soon we're on somewhat even footing again. That is until Clavel sends out Gyarados, and instantly we're left on 12 HP after a Stone Edge. Our brave Oyster Steven does his best, but he falls to an Aqua Tail on the following turn. Next up is Golduck, and I got extremely lucky here because Gyarados accidentally takes itself out. But my confidence completely tanked because after Gyarados, Clavel sends out Houndoom, which somehow completely destroyed my last 2 Pokemon. You see, the big problem with Clavel was that I couldn't get through Abomasnow with enough Pokemon to take on his ace, the grass monster Meowscarada. But after hours of attempts, I finally found a strategy that works. I start with Azumarill and steamroll Oranguru with Play Rough, Then Clavel sends out the Snowman of Death. Unfortunately, Abomasnow KOs Peekablu, but it's a-okay because I managed to confuse it, which buys me some time. But he crits me on the next turn with the Wood Hammer, so I have to swap to Cloyster. As I prepare myself with the Shell Smash, Abomasnow hits itself in confusion, so I take this as an opportunity to finish him off. The Yeti Man bit the dust. At this point, Shell Smash has me juiced up like Barry Bonds, so we're able to destroy Gyarados and Houndoom with a boosted Rock Blast and Razor Shell respectively. After my immaculate trash talking, Poltergeist shatters into fine china, and all that was left was Clavel's ace. It seems that smashing my shell transformed my icicles into vibranium because Meowscarada dies before even getting an attack in. And finally, the school principal was defeated. After accepting Clavel's request of defeating the Mafia boss of Pokemon, we head into school to fight the final boss of Team Star, Cassiopeia. And you might not believe this, but she was surprisingly difficult. Penny opens with an Umbreon and I use Loco. I go for a yawn but get flinched by Dark Pulse first. But it's fine because we're still able to set up Hurricane Sandy on the next turn. As soon as I'm ready, I swap to our Cloyster and start Shell Smashing, and pretty soon Umbreon gets wrecked. Next up is Jolteon, who we should honestly call Jokeon because I get through him no problem too with our boosted stats. Same with our next two Pokemon, Leafeon and Flareon. But unfortunately, Vaporeon is a little bit disrespectful and instantly destroys my Cloyster with a Kamehameha. I switch into Loco and absorb Vaporeon's Hydro Pump to heal up some HP, and after landing a quick yawn and earthquake combo, it was time for Penny's ace. After Sylveon's overwhelming power annihilates Loco, it's Peekablu time. Penny tries to throw the literal moon at me, but I take it like it's nothing, and in the greatest anime protagonist comeback of the century, we use Aqua Tail to take out Sylveon, ending the reign of the multimillionaire crime boss. After atoning for her empire of organized crime, we make friends with Penny and officially end the Starfall Street storyline. After this, we head over to the lighthouse where we face the strongest trainer on planet Earth, Arven. Arven leads with Greedent, and I once again send out Quagsire, because of course I do. It's my thing. I try to put my opponent to sleep like usual, but I get pelted with 4 times effective seeds, putting me into the yellow. After summoning a Category 5 Cyclone, I swap to Floatzel and start setting up. Gotta get those gains, baby! Greedent wakes up from his nap early, but it doesn't matter because at this point we're strong enough to sweep. Now that I was Super Saiyan, I one-shot the Squirrel, Toadscruel, Scovillain, and Garganacl, but his Cloyster was a different story. Neither of our attacks were super effective against one another, but after a couple of turns, I take it out with a few crunches. Finally, it was time to 1v1 a literal dog. I was kinda scared because this was Arven's ace, but Liquidation takes out Mabostiff no problem at all. With Arven out of the way, the last thing we had to do was fulfill Misty's destiny by defeating the Elite Four and becoming a Pokemon champion. Rika starts with Whiscash as I lead with Quagsire. I go for a yawn as Whiscash goes for Muddy Water, but it's too late because the sprinklers are already on. With Whiscash asleep, I switch into Floatzel and start bulking up. Even though Whiscash woke up early, it's over before it started because I've secured the gains. At this point, I think you know what time it is. Whiscash, boom! Donphan? Oh, okay, whatever, buddy. Dugtrio, also boom. Hey, camera up, guess what? Boom! Oh, that's a nice Clodsire you got there, Rika. Guess what? Wait, you're immune? My overconfidence was my greatest weakness, and my one-shotting strategy had come to an end. Pretty soon our boy was knocked out, and I had to actually play Pokemon without any degenerate strategies. This is what I would say if I wasn't freaking Misty. I go back to Steven and charge up another ultimate, but the Beached Whale uses Protect against my Titanium Icicles. I was scared and thought my one-shotting strategy actually wouldn't work, but good thing there's no justice in this world because next turn I get my hits in. First Elite Four member defeated. Next is Poppy, the master of steel types and a literal child. She leads with a giant elephant, and once again Quagsire uses the power of melatonin to put it to sleep. After bulking up, I get through Caparaja pretty easily, but Magnezone gives me a little trouble because he tries to set up a light screen. But not to worry, I one-shot him next turn. Corviknight tries to jump me, but I teach him a thing or two real quick, and then I take a bite out of the Copper Bell, leaving Poppy at her last Pokemon. Tinkaton was clearly in a league of her own because for some reason I wasn't dealing infinite damage. Once it was Tinkaton's turn, she hit me with the might of Thor's hammer, but it was more bark than bite. And on the following turn, I showed her more, bite than bark, I guess? Whatever the analogy, we beat Poppy of the Elite Four, which means it's Larry's turn. And good heavens above, was this a bloodbath. First, I try to set up my degenerate combo, putting Tropius to sleep, but Tropius had too much gamer fuel and wakes up instantly, completely owning my one-shotting ferret. But Cloyster avenges our poor Weasel with a couple ice pops and exterminates the entire rest of Larry's Pokemon. I am so sorry, Larry. And now it's time for the final member of the Elite Four, the only Dragon-type master in the entire series. Except Drasna, Lance, Cynthia, Raihan, Claire, you know what? Never mind. As you can imagine, this battle doesn't exactly drag on. Yawn on Noivern, switch into Cloyster as he sleeps, literally the exact same strategy because I'm a horrible human being. Shell Smash a couple times and Icicle Spear my way to victory, baby. With all of the Elite Four members tossed like chumps, it was time to face one of the most powerful trainers in the world, Geeta. Quagsire leads as I speedrun to put his Pather to sleep, but unfortunately Loco takes the L. But his heroic sacrifice wasn't in vain because at that very moment Espather falls asleep. I bulk up a little bit, but Espather's ability Opportunist was minorly concerning, but whatever, we ball. I go for a powered up crunch as Espather wakes up and puts me at half HP. But after one more crunch, the oversized chicken gets KO'd. Geeta uses Go-Goat next, but he's nothing more than a bad damage sponge because he also dies instantly. Avalugg follows Go-Goat and Floatzel hits him with a wave crash, then after swapping around in a couple of turns, a Play Rough from Peekaboo obliterates the Ice Turtle. Next we have King Gambit, who is quite possibly the worst Pokemon for Peekaboo to face. He almost knocks us out, so we bite the bullet and send out Golduck to try to use Disable on King Gambit, but I was just too greedy and end up going down. I switch to Slowbro next, hoping to take advantage of King Gambit's lower special defense, and after taking a Katana to the face, Slowbro knocks out King Gambit with a Surf. Next out is the Flying Tuna Fish, who goes down to the red thanks to a newly taught Shadow Ball from Slowbro. I don't want to immediately destroy him because I know we need to be healthy against her next Pokemon, Glamora, so I take some time to heal with Slack Off. Finally, after gaining enough health, it was time for Geeta's most powerful Pokemon. I take a breath as I ready myself to face this terastallized monster, barely able to imagine the Lovecraftian horrors that I would soon endure. Alright, Geeta, here we go! Oh. It just dies in one hit. Yo, I'm a champion now, let's go! And just like that, we're a champion. With our newest status as champion acquired, we go to face our rival for the very last time in the town square. I lead with Quagsire and of course go for Yawn as Lycanroc hits me with Drill Run. Next turn I set up the rain, and pretty soon the combo is ready. Lycanroc falls asleep as I switch into Floatzel and start to bulk up. I start going for Wave Crash and eventually Lycanroc goes down. Then Nemona sends in Pawmot, who goes down to another Wave Crash, and then out comes Dudunsparce, who also just dies. Next out comes the Alaskan Bullworm, who does manage to KO my Floatzel, but soon after Steven shows him who the real champion is. After using a quick super effective Icicle Spear on Goodra, we make it to Skeledirge, who barely survives the chilling water. Steven takes the L, but it's okay because we have Slowbro in the back, who dies in one hit to Shadow Ball. Okay, let's swap to Quagsire. Oh no. I smell a comeback. Karma was hitting me in the face like a freight engine, and after Nemona's insane crit, I was left with one of my last Pokemon, Golduck. Clenching my teeth, I throw out the very first Pokemon I caught in this playthrough to end this battle. Pikachu, use Water Pulse! And just like that, ladies and gentlemen, Nemona the champion was defeated. Victory road complete. But there was no time to rest because suddenly I get a phone call from Arven, who enlists my help investigating the inner crater of Paldea. I'm a big fan of Indiana Jones, so naturally I join him. This journey seemed like it would be our greatest challenge yet, so just to be on the safe side, I decided to add a ringer to our team. A Pokemon that Misty has used since all the way back in the day. We surf out to the open ocean and grab a Magikarp that we instantly evolve into a Gyarados. I name him Fish because I just kinda get that vibe from him, and now with our ultimate team set, we head into Area 0 where we meet the robot time traveler overlord AI mastermind Professor Imposter from the future who challenges us to a battle. Turo throws out the Paradox Pokemon Iron Moth, and so naturally I throw out Quagsire. Then I go for for a yawn and send out the fish. As the robot moth falls asleep, I do the only thing I know how, and that's set up until I can one-shot, baby! We use Dragon Dance to boost our attack and speed. After charging up my ultimate Pokemon, I go for Waterfall, which of course takes out the sleeping Iron Moth in one hit. Out next is Iron Hands, who goes down to a single Earthquake, and so does Iron Thorns. Same with Iron Bundle, then out comes Iron Jugulis, who at least manages to confuse Gyarados before dying. Finally, we find ourselves face to face with Turo's ace, Iron Valiant. We take a swing from the robot monster, and the Giga Chat Gyarados survives on 1 HP. Oh! No! With Gyarados down, I return to a strategy that never fails. Quagsire! Use Yawn! I try to set up Rain and a Yawn, but I'm just too low on health, and Iron Valiant wrecks me. But not before it falls asleep! Now is my chance. I swapped in Peekaboo, and after using my final play rough, ChatGPT was defeated forever. And with that, we had answered the question from the beginning of the video. Yeah, Misty can beat Pokemon Violet. Subscribe!